We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Yes? Would you sing that with me? Okay, I'll sing the line, you sing it back to me. We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Now you. Everybody rises, that's right. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. You. Poor folk are the first to suffer in this war economy. But I'm your daughter, I'm your mother. We're a chosen family. All together, when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Woo! When you lift from the bottom, everybody, ooh, sing it again. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises, that's right. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Hear this. We need air that's clean to breathe. We need water we can drink. You might say that we are weak, but we are stronger than you think. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Okay. So now when I say we have come to liberate you, it's because liberation is not something they're giving to you. We do not march to the Capitol so that they will give us liberation. That is not how liberation works. When we say we are here to liberate you, we are saying that when they hurt us, when they hold people down, they too are wrapped up in this evil, and we are saying we are here to free you from it. That's the gospel, my friends. That is the gospel. So let's sing that again. And remember that next time you march to the Capitol, y'all, that we are not there asking for something from them, that we are going there to give something to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sing with me. to liberate you, sing. From all that ways you hold me down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. You free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Yeah. You live from the bottom, everybody rises. One more again. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody. Now just y'all, sing it out. Everybody. Yeah. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Keep it up, y'all. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Last 2 times now. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. All right, bring that message to them, y'all. Let's free some people. Peace.
Thanks so much for being here with us tonight and for choosing to be here. We realize you could be doing anything else, and it's really heartening to know that all of us chose to show up for this kind of gathering. And we're looking forward to getting to know everybody a little bit more and exploring how you might be involved with the campaign if you're not already. My name is Mason Ewald, and I will be one of our co-facilitators today. I joined the campaign about a year and a half ago, was looking for a way to be more permanently and committed to being of benefit in a number of the different areas where we're focused, environmental injustice and racial injustice specifically, but the Poor People's Campaign is dedicated to a combination of interlocking injustices. My co-facilitator and partner today will be Carol Crooks. And Carol, do you want to come on just briefly and say hi?
I'm Carol Crooks, and I have a cat on my lap. I came into the program about, was before COVID. We had a program in a church in West Oakland, and I attended that. And I've been here ever since.
Great. And then I want to also just name a couple other folks from our team that are helping today. Nell, Myhand, and Peg Miller. If you want to say hi or wave your hand, they'll be helping us behind the scenes, and they may also join us in the Q&A portion of the event. So to get us started, I'll just go over some basic housekeeping items, and then we have a presentation where we'll be sharing some more about the history of the Poor People's Campaign, how the current campaign formed, and a number of other details as far as how the California campaign is structured and some of the actions we've been doing, like what we're up to. So first of all, if you haven't already, say hello in the chat, introduce yourself, and share your name, your pronouns, and your location. We'll start to see together, who from our California family is here and where everybody's from. So everyone knows closed captioning is available, and you're able to put questions and comments into the chat throughout the presentation and the meeting today. We ask that you stay on mute just for the presentation portion, so we can limit some of the audio, noises, and then we'll have plenty of time to connect with each other a little bit later. After our presentation, we will be going to breakout groups for about 20 minutes, and we'd love to do that by area or by region of California so that we can start to learn, who is near us and how we might start collaborating in person. So to do that, we're actually changing our name in Zoom. So I'm going to model that for us real quick. So in the top right corner of your image, you'll see those 3 dots. And if you click on that, there's an option to rename yourself. So I'm going to put 2 initials in front of my name, B and A, which stand for Bay Area. And you'll see that change. In the chat, you'll see several different initials, and you can locate which region you're from. And that will be Bay Area, Central Coast, Inland Empire, Los Angeles, Orange County, San Fernando Valley, San Diego, Sacramento. And then if you're not from any of those regions, you can put AL for at large, and there will be a separate breakout group for everyone in that. So if you're able to rename yourself now, that would be great. After the presentation, that'll help us organize everybody into breakout groups right away. And that is all of our housekeeping. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll begin the presentation. And then Carol and I will sort of hand off the presentation back and forth a little bit to cover different sections. So 1 second here while I do that. So in this short presentation, we'll provide a brief history of the 1968 campaign and the 2017 call, as well as the 2018 launch of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Then we'll go into the structure of the campaign and provide some examples of how we take action and information about how you can get involved. The image on this slide is the national campaign logo with a silhouette of a massive group of people, of waving flags, and the words Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. In 1967 and 1968, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leaders, and others came together to forge a campaign to bring national attention to the unjust economic conditions facing millions of people worldwide. In November 1967, Dr. King announced the Poor People's Campaign to challenge economic inequality, militarism, and poverty. He articulated a clear formula for how the poor can claim the power that resides within our communities to create a new and unsettling force. His vision emphasized the importance of respect for the poor and the need for poor Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans to unite. The image description for this slide is a Black woman with an I Have a Dream sign on the back of her raincoat, walking in the mud of Resurrection City.
Next, an effort to revive a famous movement of the 1960s focused on reducing poverty, inequality, and tackling social justice. But with such a broad agenda, will it find enough support at this polarized time? We start with a look at the campaign that began 50 years ago. Shortly before his death in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expanded his civil rights campaign to include calls for economic justice. He called for an economic revolution that included protection and services for the poorest Americans. He would call it the Poor People's Campaign.
We're coming to get our check.
The campaign would bring together poor people from across the country and from across racial, ethnic, and geographic lines, including poor whites, for a march on Washington.
Even if you have to bring a whole family, we are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions.
The first step was to construct a shanty town called Resurrection City on the National Mall, housing thousands of participants in a form of nonviolent civil disobedience. Dr. King himself would never make it to the March on Washington. He died that spring. But weeks after his assassination, 50,000 people gathered in solidarity, demanding economic reform on the steps where Dr. King had professed, "I have a dream."
We come with an appeal to open the doors of America to the almost 50 million Americans who have not been given a fair share of America's wealth and opportunity.
Half a century later, a group of religious and moral leaders are planning a wave of civil disobedience in Washington, a revival of the Poor People's Campaign. It is headed in part by the Reverend William Barber, who's the co-chair of the campaign. He led demonstrators at a rally in front of the U.S. Capitol this month, and he was arrested, alongside the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a key figure in the 1968 movement. I spoke with Reverend Barber recently when he was in Washington. Reverend William Barber, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you very much for joining us. When the original Poor People's Campaign took place, it was 50 years ago. Dr. Martin Luther King was involved. After he was assassinated, it continued. But what is the connection between then and now?
Well, thank you so much for having us. And on behalf of the campaign, the National Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival, and my co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, let me say that the connection was, first of all, that it did continue, that people realized Dr. King was right. Racism, poverty, and militarism were interconnected. The connection today is we did a study, we commissioned a study with the Institute for Policy Studies and also had some help with Urban Institute, anecdotal and empirical data. And we did something called the Souls of Poor Folk, auditing America 50 years after the Poor People's Campaign. What did we find? Today, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people. Today, there are 250,000 people that die every year from low wealth. We have less voting rights today because of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act than we had in 1965. We have 62 million people who are working poor, who work for less than a living wage, and 14 million children who are in poverty.
Those numbers are overwhelming. They are daunting. You're not proposing to do away with poverty, are you?
We are saying that there are 5 interlocking injustices that America has to face because they continue to cause policy violence. That is systemic racism, particularly seen through the lens of voter suppression, where people use voter suppression to get elected, and then once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt the poor, mostly white women, children, and the working poor. Systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy and militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism that says you don't have to address those issues. We are saying, yes, America is going to have to face these 5 interlocking injustices and change them.
Why can't you work through the existing political system, work to elect political figures who agree with your agenda?
Well, several reasons. Number one, we had 26 presidential debates in the last presidential election. On the Democrat and Republican side, not 1 hour was spent on poverty. Not 1 hour was spent on voter suppression and restoring the Voting Rights Act. Not 1 hour on the war economy and militarism. So if we're not even having the conversation, the first thing we have to change is the attention violence. We have an attention violence when it comes to poverty and the poor, and we must change that before you can change the agenda. And it must be a movement of the people from the bottom up.
Reverend Barber, I talk to people, I've read folks who agree with much of what you are saying you want, but they also are saying you're asking for too many different things, that you should narrow your list of ambitions, that you'll have a much better chance at getting something done.
Well, then those same people should say narrow the Constitution because it's pretty ambitious. It says domestic tranquility, establishment of justice, providing for the common defense, promoting the welfare, general welfare. Narrow the moral call of the Bible that says you're supposed to care for the stranger, the hungry, the sick, the left out, the lonely, the imprisoned. Why is it that that wealthy and greed gets to ask for everything? They want tax cuts, they get that. They want to block health care, they get that. But then we tell poor people, you have to ask for one thing. 37 million people without health care, we have to fight for health care. Millions of people without living wages, we can't just ask for one thing because they are systemically interlocking injustices.
If there are so many who you define as poor in this country, why aren't we seeing more people rise up and make this argument? I mean, it's right now it's left to you and a relatively small group of people who are making this argument. Having your the march, having your demonstrations and so forth?
Well, I don't know if I would say a relatively small group. We have organizing committees in 40 states. We have people who are organizing. In the last 2 weeks, we've had thousands of people attend, over nearly 2,000 people do civil disobedience, more than ever in the history of this country, simultaneously doing nonviolent moral fusion, civil disobedience. There is a rising, and why? And so what we're doing is we're launching a movement. We're not ending a movement. We're launching a movement and calling people to action. Many people do not know how bad it is, and many people who are poor and low wealth have been broken and pushed down and ignored. But where we're going from West Virginia to Wisconsin, from Alabama to Alaska, we're finding that there are thousands of people who are saying it's time for us to stand up and refuse to be silent.
You've said that the nation's problem is not that we don't have enough money. You said it's that we don't have the moral capacity to face what ails society. What did you mean by that?
That when you look at our deepest moral framework of the Constitution and our deepest moral values of our religious tradition, we too often have a political conversation that talks about left versus right, military or middle class. That's too puny, it's too narrow. 43.5% of this country is poor and low wealth. People are dying. Even Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, said the America has to face the cost of inequality. What I'm saying is we can't just have a left-right argument anymore. We need to have a deeply moral argument that says this is not just about Democrats or Republicans. This is about America. What kind of democracy do we want to be? You cannot have a democracy continue to exist when 400 people make an average of $97,000 an hour and you lock people up who simply want 15 in the union.
Does either political party come closer to your goals?
Well, I think they can. I think they hit at it. I think, of course, the extremists who have taken over the Republican Party have just gone so far extreme. You know, they're more focused on tax cuts to the wealthy. They want to blame poor people for their problems. Democrats, on the other hand, are willing to talk about, say, the Affordable Care Act and talk about the middle class. But the reality is neither party is willing to put right in front of America the issues of systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and say the word poverty. It's almost as though we've tried to remove even saying the word poverty, when in fact the majority of the poor people in this country are white, women, children, working people, and the disabled. So we have to change our narrative in this country. And the only way you can change the narrative is to change the narrator. That's why this campaign is focused on three things: breaking through the narrative, massive voter mobilization among the poor, and power building from the bottom up.
Reverend William Barber, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So on this next slide, we'll share a little bit more about the history. Unfortunately, the unity and the organization needed for the Poor People's Campaign of 1968 to complete all three of the planned stages and form this new and unsettling force capable of disrupting complacent national life and achieving an economic Bill of Rights was not easy to come by. The assassinations of Dr. King and Senator Robert Kennedy, a key proponent of the campaign and a current presidential candidate at the time, served to cripple the campaign and greatly limit its impact. Midway through the campaign, Robert Kennedy, whose wife was or had attended the Mother's Day opening of Resurrection City, was assassinated. Out of respect for the campaign, his funeral procession passed through Resurrection City. The Department of the Interior forced Resurrection City to close on June 24th, 1968, after the permit to use parkland had expired. The image description for this slide is ministers and others sing and march together in Washington, D.C. Reverend Jesse Jackson and Indian rights activist Melvin Tom are among those pictured. In the face of setbacks due to political violence and assassinations, as well as the difficulties of sustaining a national movement, the Poor People's Campaign of 1968 nevertheless had an impact, not only on governmental policies, but also on public perceptions. The campaign pushed Congress and federal agencies to allocate millions for programs such as Head Start and education welfare services for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, while it also helped catalyze the desegregation of schools and extension of labor programs. The campaign introduced new strategies for protest and social change. The movement also transformed national discussions on race, class, economic opportunities, security, and democracy. The image description for this slide is a period sign that says "Feed Folks." So now I will pass the baton to my co-facilitator, Carol.
Okay. Now we're going to hear about the current Poor People's Campaign. On December 4, 2017, the 50th anniversary of the announcement of the first Poor People's Campaign, a diverse leadership came together in Washington, D.C. to launch the new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, co-chaired by Reverend Theo Harris of the Kairos Center, with the support of, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, II of Repairs of the Breach, and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris of the Kairos Center, with the support of many organizations, denominations, and individuals now in 45 states across the country. The campaign launched with two primary goals: change the narrative by changing the narrator. That means putting more focus on who and why people are poor, and amplifying the voices of those most impacted by the systemic forces that keep people in poverty. 2, build power to change policy through a fusion movement that unites communities and partner organizations. The image description for this slide is a photo of Bishop Barber and Reverend Theo Harris wearing "Jesus was a poor man" stoles, standing in front of a rose window. The new Poor People's Campaign is building on the idea of fusion movements that have brought progressive change throughout history. The modern Poor People's Campaign, a movement, not a moment. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is an organism, not an organization, lifts from the bottom, confronts the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, is a fusion movement. What does a fusion movement mean? It means recognizing the construct of race and racism used to keep us apart, building a broad, diverse coalition, intentionally diversifying the movement, engaging in indigenously led grassroots organizing, committing to nonviolent action, and resisting the one-moment mentality. We are building a movement. You'll find in the chat a link to excerpts from 14 Steps to Moral Fusion Organizing, Poor People's Campaign Fundamental Principles. On this slide is the condensed version of the 12 fundamental principles of the Poor People's Campaign, which guide our work. We read the full principles at many local meetings to ground ourselves in the work. They are worth time studying if you want to get involved. And again, you can find the full description of the principles of the Poor People's Campaign website, as well as through the link on the chat. Also, please note the last principle on the list: embrace nonviolence, because it is particularly important for folks considering joining the campaign as a volunteer. Violent tactics or actions will not be tolerated, period. You will be asked to sign a covenant of nonviolence as part of the California Poor People's Campaign if you engage in any direct action events, such as sitting in at the Capitol in Sacramento. The covenant of nonviolence is far more than a document to sign when engaging in direct action. It is an ideal woven through all the principles of the campaign, especially because others may try to disrupt and weaken the nonviolence foundation of our work. The image description for this slide is a PPC sign by artist David Solnit, which says, "We rise together," in black on a yellow disc with silhouettes of marching people in black. The bottom says, "Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival." Given the US population is estimated at slightly higher than 300 million. The fact that 140 million of our people are poor or low income means that more than 40% of the population lives in poverty. These statistics are pre-COVID and do not include the estimated 8 million who have fallen into poverty as a result of the pandemic. These statistics are drawn from the Supplemental Poverty Measure, an alternative approach to assessing poverty that differs from the official poverty measure, which is limited and outdated. When the official poverty measure is quoted publicly, it often does not reflect the full scale of poverty in the country. You can read more about how poverty is measured in the campaign's moral budget from the website. The link is in the chat. Part of grassroots organizing is to go out, listen, and engage with people most affected by the policies that keep poor people down. The Poor People's Campaign has taken to bus tours to engage with their supporters and form state organizing committees. The campaign's early tours brought together those drawn from all segments of the fusion movement. The 2019 tour highlighted the voices of the poor in hearings on homelessness, mass incarceration, and the criminalization of poverty. During the election year of 2020, the campaign led the mobilizing, organizing, registering, and education tour, known as the MORE Tour, to not only register voters, but also to mobilize new and existing campaign supporters to commit to its aims and principles. This national tour kicked off in June 2019 and was meant to be ongoing until May 2020. Our wonderful December 2019 tour stop in San Francisco was one of the last in-person events. Subsequently, 4 states had their tour stops canceled, but soon the campaign took to Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Zoom. Recordings of the Facebook Live feeds are available on the National Campaign's Facebook page. The image description for this slide is about 30 people with signs stand in front of a yellow school bus in Massachusetts. Bishop Barber emphasizes that we cannot make demands without data. The Poor People's Campaign has undertaken and continues to conduct extensive research to create accurate, current information about poverty and the poor. You'll find links to all of these studies and research documents on the campaign's website. We started with the Souls of Poor Folk Moral Audit, which provided a data-driven analysis of the historical and empirical realities of poverty in the last 50 years since the 1968 campaign. The most recent, Waking the Sleeping Giant, Poor and Low-Income Voters in the 2020 Elections, reports findings that support the campaign's analysis that organizing among the poor around an agenda that represents their concerns can fundamentally change the political map of this country and lead to policies that are just and representative for all Americans. The image description for this slide is the logos of the Institute for Policy Studies, the Poor People's Campaign, Kairos Center, and Repairers of the Breach are pictured across the bottom of the slide. Now we'll look at the campaign structure. Because the Poor People's Campaign is a joint project of Repairers of the Breach and the Kairos Center, the staff from these nonprofits manage the national campaign, coordinating events, policies, and other activities. The campaign itself is all volunteer. The image description for this slide is a map of California that shows the regions. Given California's size, we also have several regional steering committees in addition to the state coordinating committee. They include the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Inland Empire, Sacramento, Orange County, Northeast San Fernando Valley, and San Diego. The new Central Coast region includes 3 counties, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura. The image description is a map of California shows the regions. Our work is carried out by statewide and regional working groups. You can see the feedback form in the chat to get more information or get connected to statewide or working groups in your region. Image description, 3 photos of different actions are featured. One tool for building the campaign is our statewide meetings, which everyone is invited to join. We invite you to share your talents and skills. We always need facilitators for the Jubilee Study Course and welcome sessions and tech support for all meetings and events. You don't have to be a lawyer to join the legal working group, which meets bi-monthly. You don't have to be an artist to join the art theomusicology working group. The image description is a Zoom meeting screen in gallery view as pictured. The next set of slides feature local, statewide, and national actions that give you some ideas of the kinds of activities we engage in to advance our agenda.
Thanks so much, Carol. So art and theomusicology are integral elements of the campaign, not an afterthought. In 2020, based on the campaign core message and song, "Everybody's Got a Right to Live," Californians statewide chose a letter to make, took a picture with their letter, which was then assembled into a virtual mural. You may be asked at some point to submit a photo with a letter to help our messaging. Seeing many people's faces supporting our messages has a special magic. The image description here is a variety of people holding signs spelling out "Everybody's got a right to live" on a yellow background with the heading "California Poor People's Campaign." You may have joined some of our Moral Monday broadcasts on March 15th, 2021. In more than 30 states, we had demand deliveries of the 14 policy priorities to the capitals. Here in California, we drove to Sacramento, read those 14 points on the Capitol Mall, and delivered them to the state legislature. The image description for this slide is a Zoom webinar screen from a Memorial Monday shows 2 scenes in California and an ASL interpreter. The recently expanded child tax credit means that families that had previously been too poor, quote, to qualify for the benefit are now eligible. The Policy Political Education Working Group designed informational flyers, which we've been distributing throughout the state. And then the Benefits Access Working Group has also been doing outreach through its getcovidresources.org portal. Please check it out and share it if you have a chance. The image description for this slide is 1 photo and 2 flyers. Upper left, 3 women holding flyers standing outside. Lower left, a black and white flyer with info about the child tax credit. And then on the right is a flyer from the Sacramento PPC. Our May 24th Moral Monday featured the launch of the 3rd Reconstruction Congressional Resolution. You may know that following the end of the Civil War, Reconstruction driven by a moral fusion movement, people from diverse backgrounds, faith traditions, geography pushed for progressive changes. The Civil Rights Movement was a 2nd Reconstruction that brought dramatic changes in public policy. Yet the work is undone, obviously, so we are building a 3rd Reconstruction to fully address poverty from the bottom up. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. The image here is a webinar screen with Bishop Barber, Reverend Theo Harris, and Congress members Barbara Lee and Pramila Jayapal with an American Sign Language interpreter. This resolution recognizes that in order to build a true 3rd Reconstruction, we must simultaneously deal with 5 interlocking injustices. Currently, there are 8 California reps who've signed on and 41 nationwide. You can read and find info about which congressional reps have signed the resolution by clicking on a link in the chat. Please sign and share the petition urging Congress to pass the 3rd Reconstruction Resolution. The link is in the chat here, and the image description for the slide is 2 pictures. On the left, a group of 8 people with various banners and signs in Santa Clara County. On the right, a group of 4 people with a black man holding a microphone in Santa Barbara. Next up is a short video about our national organizing push for congressional representatives to sign on.
We are in one of those moments that demand a poor people's campaign.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
When we throw away
way more food than it takes to feed every person, not just that's hungry in this country, but around the world. That is not right.
Something is wrong.
That is a moral emergency, and that's why we need a Poor People's Campaign.
There's other systems here that are oppressing us that voting won't always fix, and that we've got to talk about, we've got to call it out, and we've got to mobilize and build a movement to be able to change these things that our politicians won't always change.
But if you don't recognize us, and then it goes back to that second chapter, that we're the forgotten ones.
Until we are ready to keep this fight going.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard.
Let the people vote! That's how you honor veterans.
When you hold down the poor, you hold down America.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We are building a multiracial, intergenerational, nonviolent army of the poor that will break every chain. Every chain.
And so we have to come to a point that every attack on the poor will embolden our agitation. Every attack on sick folk will embolden our agitation. Every attack on immigrants will embolden our agitation.
We can do more. We can do better. And we're building the power. Forward together.
Not one step back.
We want health care. We're not lazy. We work. We work.
That's right.
We want a living wage. We want unions. We want health care. We want just what basic people need.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to dream.
I'm ready to fight. I am tired.
Where we're going to keep on making this holy trouble, keep on defending our democracy, keep on speaking for voting rights and for health care and for living wages and for everything that everybody in this society needs to thrive.
It's time to get it right here and right now. No racist superiority is ever greater than the rights of humanity.
Our country now stands at a tipping point. We can realize a third Reconstruction to fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up.
We all must embrace this omnibus vision of third Reconstruction. No democracy can claim to be strong when 140 million people, or 43% of its people, are poor and low wealth. That's talking about 52% of children under 18, 39 million children. That's 41% of elders above 65, 21 million. That's 42.6% of men, that's 65 million. That's 45% of women, 74 million. That's 60% of black people, 26 million. That's 64% of Latinos, 38 million. That's 40% of Asian people, 8 million. That's 59% of Native Indigenous people, that's 2.1 million. And that's 33.5% of white people, that's 66 million white people. Before the pandemic ever hit, according to a study at Columbia University, 250,000 people a year died from the pandemic of poverty, 750 people a day.
We have the solutions. They're right here. They're right here in this third Reconstruction resolution. And so we must build the political will, the compelling power, the resolve to lift from the bottom.
This is a moral issue rooted in the commitments of our Constitution, that the first thing we swear to is to establish justice, promote the general welfare, and to ensure equal protection under the law. This is a moral agenda, but a moral agenda from my faith tradition. Morality is not just folk coming together and singing we love each other. It is coming together by the Spirit, building a community where there is no lack. So a moral agenda is also a sound economic agenda.
Today we say to poor people, Mr. Speaker, we see you and we will eradicate poverty in our country with you.
It's movement time. It's time to shake this nation, because this nation is locked up.
Rise up. Rise up. Rise up.
Get up tomorrow and start the revolution.
The fundamental principle number 11 states, we uphold the need to do a season of sustained moral direct action as a way to break through the tweets and shift the moral narrative. We are demonstrating the power of people coming together across issues and geography and putting our bodies on the line to the issues that are affecting us all. From July 12th to August 2nd, we had a set of actions to press our demands that Congress and the filibuster pass all provisions of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, fully restore all provisions of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. The image description for this slide is 4 photos. Upper left, a banner held by 6 women announcing the women-led action in Washington, D.C. Lower left, 2 Bay Area women being processed after arrest. Middle right is a photo of a woman being arrested holding a sign that reads, "Protect our vote." And far right, a woman in a crowd behind a police line.
On July 26th, as part of the season of moral nonviolent direct action, the California campaign held direct actions at Senator Dianne Feinstein's Los Angeles and San Francisco offices. Image description, 2 photos. On the left, 4 people holding sign and blocking an office door. On the right, 15 people hold a 40-foot banner that reads, "Senator Feinstein bust the filibuster," in front of an office building. Hey Congress, we coming. We began planning for June 18, 2022, when we'll be in person for a mass Poor People's Assembly in Washington, D.C. We need your help. The image cap description is a map of the U.S. with hundreds of yellow and gold dots spreading out across the country that says Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington. You can visit poorpeoplescampaign.org and check out the Take Action section, where you'll find an ever-changing array of actions and policy documents. Third Reconstruction Resolution link will be in the chat. Image description, a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival poster with silhouettes of marchers across the top. You can follow us on Twitter. Image description, a young Black man with a megaphone in front of a march with a banner and many people. You can find us on Facebook. The links are in the chat. Image description, David Solnit illustrations for the Jubilee Policy Platform include a needle and thread stitching together the nation with a moral revolution. At the bottom are tags with the 5 interlocking injustices and a pair of scissors. We always appreciate donations of any amount. We'll drop in the chat the info to donate online or through our fiscal sponsor, Atina, environmental through inspiration and nonviolent action. Please check the chat for the link. Thank you for attending. Please fill out the feedback form by clicking or copying the link from the chat. It includes space to say how you want to be involved. Image description, people marching behind a Poor People's Campaign banner in Washington, D.C.
So as we mentioned earlier, everyone, we will be going to some breakout groups and getting to know each other a little bit more. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and found it informative. I certainly do and continue to as I go through it again. Well, hi, everyone. Maybe is that all of us who have returned? Looks like our full group. Well, I hope that was a meaningful hangout for everybody. We are going to open the floor now to some Q&A and some sharing. So, I mean, this is where a lot of the real fun begins. We've done some informational session, and now there's a chance to, learn more, go into greater depth about something that maybe wasn't clear, or learn more about how you specifically can become involved in the campaign. Maybe you have some ideas, but would like some clarity on something. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So we welcome all questions and inquiries. I also want to welcome just some shares on your own personal experience of the conversations you just had, maybe something you appreciated. Feel free to share that. That can be really helpful for all of us as well. So to raise your hand, for those of you maybe not familiar with Zoom, there's a reactions button at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that. It has a little smiley face. If you click on that, that can allow you to raise your hand. if you're not seeing that for some reason, or if it's not working, feel free to just wave at us and hopefully someone will see you. So, okay. So it looks like Charles has a question. Charles?
I put it in the chat.
Okay. Okay, can you go into more depth about what PPC does? Charles, can I ask you to, are you wondering about at a local level or at a national level, or is there something specific that you're wondering? Nell, are you speaking?
Yes, he said both possible.
Okay.
So
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead, man.
well, I think this might be a good team effort because there's a lot we could cover. So I'll just share something up front. I mean, there's so many layers to what we're doing. What a lot of what Bishop Barber was articulating in the beginning of the presentation, I think, is so profoundly important when he's talking about changing the narrative by changing the narrator. I mean, a lot of how we see changes happen in culture and society is at that level of story and like narrative. All of our attention is, we have limited attention, and there are a number of causes and groups and things, battling for our attention. So sometimes the narrative or the truth about poverty doesn't receive as much attention as it can. So a lot of what we're doing is sharing that, and sharing that more effectively through leadership, but also by changing the narrator, by clarifying who is poor and why, and actually, as you saw in a lot of these videos, providing poor people with a platform so that they can share their stories and testimonials, and people who aren't poor, don't understand poverty, can begin to understand the realities. And that's more of the national level, maybe, and then there's a lot more we're doing at the policy level nationally too, but maybe I'll hand the baton to Nell.
Sure. So, so I noticed, Vittorio, that you're in Orange County. Is that right? Yeah. And so I said that because some of what the Poor People's Campaign does is based in where we are. And so if you've seen the Moral Mondays, you know that we've done a lot of work in West Virginia. And so the people there are focused on getting rid of Manchin, getting him to move on the filibuster. And if he refuses to move on the filibuster, getting rid of him. In Orange County, I know that recently there's been attacks on Mary's Kitchen that serves unhoused community in Orange County. And so the Poor People's Campaign has been doing a set of things to support the fight against the displacement of people, unhoused folks. Here in the Bay Area, last Friday, we participated in a mural action outside Black Rock that was focused on climate chaos, right? So because we're partnering, we're national partners with the Sunrise Movement, and climate change, ecological devastation is one of the 5 interlocking injustices. So we are taking action on that. So different regions focus on work that is based on what the needs of the impacted people are, where they are. And then we have some things that are statewide, like the child tax credit was a statewide action because 50% of the people living in California are living in poverty. And so the child tax credit, which the expansion of the child tax credit meant that some of the poorest people who had previously been deemed not eligible because they didn't make enough money, they were excluded from receiving a child tax credit. Well, now there's an expansion that says that it's fully refundable. So regardless of whether you make enough money to file taxes, you're still eligible. So statewide, we had a campaign to get the word out about that because those are impacted people. And so we do work statewide. And then we also do work nationally. So that you may know that the Apache Stronghold in their fight to preserve Oak Flat, which is a sacred, it's where they practice their traditional religious practices have been land-based at Oak Flat. And the US government is turning that land over to a copper mining company that is threatening to decimate that sacred site. And so they had a hearing at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they came into California. They stopped in LA, they came to the Bay Area. We did several actions there. But the national campaign has been supporting Oak Flat, the Apache stronghold, and the fight to preserve Oak Flat for the last 3 years, right? So and then the third Reconstruction resolution to fully address poverty from the bottom up, that's another national initiative. So we work on the regional level, the statewide level, and the national level.
Thank you, Nell.
Sure.
As always, a fountain of wisdom and knowledge. And we could say so much more about all of that. So if anyone has follow-up questions, feel free. I just want to notice one. Oh, I'm sorry. Is someone speaking?
I was just saying that question about the school boards, because I don't know that. I was
let's call that out.
Yeah,
Nell responded to that in the chat, but it would be helpful for everyone to see that and know that. So Timothy asked, does the Poor People's Campaign run people for school boards on the issue of teaching kids the truth about slavery, racism, poverty, white supremacist violence? And Nell responded, but it's worth noting that we are nonpartisan, so we do not run candidates. Does anyone else have a question? And if not, maybe a reflection or a share from your breakout group? Oh, Timothy, did you have a follow-up question about that?
Many school boards are nonpartisan. So could you run candidates for such school boards while remaining nonpartisan?
It's just not how we organize. We don't run candidates. Our focus is on the White House, the Congress, and the courts. We want policy change. And so we have a way of working, but it isn't about running candidates. And to your question about candidate forums, actually in 2019, we had a Moral Action Congress in Washington, DC, and 9 of the presidential candidates. We invited all of the presidential candidates and 9 showed up. And part of, one of our fundamental principles is that we don't, if you're a politician, you cannot be in leadership of the campaign because that's not how we organize. But we don't pass the microphone. But we did invite them because how we organize is that we want to know from candidates where they stand on the issues that are important to impact the people. And so we do have candidate forums because we want to know what they're willing to do to address the needs and concerns of this 140 million people in the US who are living, and that was pre-COVID, living in poverty or one $400 emergency away. So we do have candidate forums.
Thank you, Timothy. I'm seeing, is it Mia?
Hi, I'm Mia from Sacramento. In our breakout room, we were wondering for the regionals, is there a core group of regional PPC folks who meet on a regular basis, either through Zoom or in person, who volunteer to do the communications or outreach groups? So you had us break out into regional groups. So is that something that we would do as far as getting involved?
There's a very active Sacramento region. Yes, so I can put you in touch with Faye Wilson Kennedy if you don't know her already. There's a very active Sacramento region with lots of different working groups. They do a lot of work around basic needs with unhoused communities. They do a lot of work around the climate. And we're often in Sacramento because that's where our state house is. And so
yes,
they are often hosting us. About 2 months ago, the Homeless Union organized a freedom ride that started in Orange County and stopped in, at various places, Fresno, and they came up to the Bay Area and they went through Vallejo. They went to Sausalito, where there are people living on boats who are threatened with losing their housing because, how money works. And so you may have a boat that you're living on, but you may not have another option. And so when they want to raise the cost of keeping your boat at the dock and like that. So anyway, they landed in Sacramento and were there for a couple of days. So yeah, Mia, if you fill out that form, I will definitely put you in touch with Faye Wilson Kennedy and Brother Carter in Sacramento.
Thank you.
Oh, I
And
see.
now I'm seeing, I was just going to say, Reverend Aaron's raising his hand. He's in the Sacramento area, so maybe he wants to build on that response for you, Mia. I'm not sure.
Actually, I'm not in the Sacramento area. I'm in Auburn, which really is the Placer County, Nevada County, in that area. We had one person from Marysville. I'm in Auburn. I'm sure there are other people in my area, which is to the east of the Sacramento area. And it would be nice actually if we could form our own group and maybe attract people from this area. There are quite a few of us here. And I, for one, represent a large number of faith-based people from every church in Placer County. So that's a large group. And we would be interested in forming our own group.
Great. That's fantastic. Reverend Al and Reverend Aaron. I know that I heard that you were at the Faith working group and Reverend Rowan had been in touch with you. So we'll have to figure out, a time to meet and put our heads together about building the campaign in Placer County.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, thanks, everybody. We're about the end of our time, but if there's any last question, I don't want to stop you. So last call. Okay. Looks like Mia, or maybe there's another question from Tim.
Okay.
I'm putting the link in for the feedback. You just click on it, it'll come up.
Okay. Thanks, Peg.
Yeah.
Let's take this last question from Timothy. What do you do to get out the vote? I have participated in text banking campaigns. There are also phone banking campaigns. The Environmental Voter Project tries to get environmentalists to vote, as increased turnout of such voters.
Well,
Elle, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, we are doing a lot to protect the vote, starting with getting rid of the filibuster. And so in the presentation, you heard about the demonstrations outside Senator Feinstein's office because she has dug in her heels and refuses to admit that the filibuster is being used to block the Voting Rights Act, John Lewis for the People Act, and the full restoration of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which are both really important pieces of legislation to deal with the voter suppression laws that are being put in place all across the country. So we work on that level. In the run-up to the 2020 election, we did phone banking, text banking. During the voting season, we did voter protection, poll watching. We organized in a lot of states. And so that's part of what, as we're gearing up for June 18, 2020, we have our vision set on the midterm elections, and that the thing of really turning out low income, low propensity voters. The study that Carol mentioned, Waking the Sleeping Giant, documents the impact that low income, low propensity voters had on the 2020 elections. And so that's a lot of our work, is to press, as you said, Timothy, press the candidates to address the issues of impacted people, so that we don't tell people who to vote for. But I'm an impacted person. So if I hear somebody saying, yes, for instance, I think that the asset limit on people who are receiving Social Security disability income should be lifted, so that you don't have to live in poverty just because you happen to be disabled, then that tells me a lot about whether or not I would choose to vote for them. And so that is the approach that we take, which is to invite the candidates and hear from them and, and encourage people to both listen to what they're saying and be prepared to push them if they get elected, because we know the fight's not over when the counting is done. So.
Thanks, Nell.
Sure.
Well, I'm just looking at the time. I want to respect everyone's time. If you have something else you need to get to. Nell, do you think would you like us to close with the song, or do you think it's better for us to close with the call and response?
Yeah, I would suggest the call and response, but you have to teach it.
Yeah. Okay. So you may have seen one of our last slides that we have a tradition at the PPC to end our meetings with a call and response. So I'm going to invite everyone to unmute themselves just for these last few seconds. And so the call is forward together, and the response is not one step back. So I'll lead with forward together, and then everyone else says not one step back, and then we'll repeat 2 more times. Are we ready?
Yep.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step
back.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is really beautiful being with you tonight.
Thank you, Nell.
You're so welcome.
Thank you,
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Stacy. It's good to see you here. Reverend Monica Cross from Laney. Thank you so much for being here. Great to see you all. And I'll look forward to the next time on Zoom. We'll be inviting you to, watch for the newsletter. It always has announcements about things that are coming up. So.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Your turn's coming.
I know.